"Vermin!" The word drops into Providence Municipal Court like a stone into still water. Pastor Malcolm Rhodes, 58 years old, stands at the defendant's table in an immaculate charcoal suit, gold Rolex visible beneath his cuff, Bible clutched in his right hand. He's pointing directly at Judge Frank Caprio. "You are vermin, an insect, a pest that infests God's kingdom on earth." Judge Caprio's pen stops mid-stroke. He looks up slowly. For 5 seconds, he simply stares at Pastor Rhodes. Then 10. 15. The courtroom is frozen. No one moves. No one breathes. Finally, Judge Caprio sets down his pen with deliberate care. He removes his glasses, folds them, places them precisely on the bench. His voice, when it comes, is quieter than anyone has ever heard. "Pastor Rhodes, I want to make absolutely certain I heard you correctly. Did you just call me vermin?" Pastor Rhodes doesn't hesitate. His voice booms, practiced from decades of preaching. "I called you what you are. An obstacle to God's work, a secular parasite feeding on the righteous. You sit in judgment of a man of God. You." He laughs, sharp and contemptuous. "I answer to the Almighty. You're nothing but an appointed bureaucrat with delusions of authority." The courtroom erupts in gasps and murmurs. Judge Caprio raises one hand. Instant silence. But for the first time in 38 years on the bench, Judge Frank Caprio appears genuinely speechless. His mouth opens slightly, closes. He looks at Pastor Rhodes like he's seeing something he can't quite process. 10 more seconds pass. 20. The silence becomes uncomfortable, unbearable. Subscribe if you believe no one, regardless of title, has the right to dehumanize a judge in open court. Finally, Judge Caprio speaks. His voice is still quiet, dangerously quiet. "Miss Lewis, read the charges." Court Clerk Deborah Lewis stands, her hands visibly shaking. Case 2024 CR 5729, State of Rhode Island versus Malcolm Anthony Rhodes. Charges: tax evasion, wire fraud, money laundering, sexual harassment, witness intimidation, and contempt of court. Pastor Rhodes waves his Bible dismissively. Persecution. Every prophet faces it. Every servant of God is attacked by the forces of darkness. You're simply the latest demon sent to test my faith. Judge Caprio is still staring at him, still processing. He picks up the case file, 648 pages, and opens it slowly. He reads the first page in complete silence. Then the second, the third. 2 minutes pass. 3. Pastor Rhodes shifts his weight, adjusts his tie, but maintains his confident smirk. Judge Caprio finally closes the file. "Pastor Rhodes, before we proceed, I need you to understand something. In 38 years on this bench, I've been insulted, threatened, and disrespected. I've been called incompetent, corrupt, and biased. But in 38 years, no one has ever called me vermin. No one has ever dehumanized me in my own courtroom. So I'm going to do something I rarely do." He pauses. "I'm going to let the evidence speak first. Then we'll return to your word choice. Prosecutor Chen, call your first witness." Assistant District Attorney Michael Chen stands, clearly shaken by what he just witnessed. "Your Honor, the state calls IRS Special Agent Rebecca Torres." A woman in her 40s approaches the stand, navy suit, federal credentials, the calm precision of someone who follows money trails for a living. She's sworn in. "Agent Torres, you investigated Pastor Malcolm Rhodes?" "Yes." "The investigation began 2 years ago when a whistleblower from Resurrection Glory megachurch contacted the IRS about financial irregularities. Resurrection Glory is a tax-exempt religious organization with approximately 8,000 members and annual revenues of $42 million. What did you discover?" Agent Torres pulls out a thick binder. "Pastor Rhodes has been systematically defrauding his congregation and evading taxes for at least 12 years. He created a complex network of shell companies, fake charities, and offshore accounts to hide personal income and avoid both church accountability and federal taxes. Walk me through the scheme." Resurrection Glory operates as a 501c3 tax-exempt organization. Donations to the church are tax-deductible for members and tax-free for the church. Pastor Rhodes is paid a salary reported as $180,000 annually. However, we discovered he's been siphoning millions through fraudulent means. Agent Torres opens the binder. First, he created a consulting company called Kingdom Advisory Services. The church pays this company $1.2 million annually for spiritual consulting. Pastor Rhodes owns Kingdom Advisory through a trust. That's $1. $2 million in personal income hidden as business expenses. Second, he established a fake charity called Global Gospel Outreach, claiming to fund missionaries overseas. The church donates approximately $3 million annually to this charity. We traced the funds. They don't go to missionaries. They go to Pastor Rhodes's personal accounts in the Cayman Islands. The courtroom murmurs. Pastor Rhodes examines his manicured nails, unbothered. Third, the church purchased at $2. 9 million pastoral residence, claiming it's necessary for ministry work and community outreach. The residence is a 12,000-square-foot mansion with an indoor pool, wine cellar, home theater, and 4-car garage. Pastor Rhodes lives there with his wife. No ministry occurs there, no community outreach. It's a personal residence purchased with tax-exempt church funds. Fourth, the church owns 3 luxury vehicles: a Mercedes S-Class, a Range Rover, and a Bentley Continental, all titled as ministry vehicles. Pastor Rhodes drives them exclusively for personal use. Fifth, we discovered the church credit card has been used for personal expenses: designer clothing, jewelry, luxury vacations, country club memberships, and fine dining. Total personal charges over 5 years, $2.7 million. Judge Caprio leans forward. How much total did Pastor Rhodes steal? Conservatively, $38 million over 12 years. His actual personal income averaged $3.2 million annually, while reporting only $180,000 to the IRS. He evaded approximately $11.4 million in federal taxes. Did he pay any of those taxes? 0. He claimed all income was religious compensation exempt from taxation. That's false. Even clergy pay taxes on personal income. He simply hid the money and lied about its nature. Pastor Rhodes stands. This is an attack on religious freedom. The government has no right. Sit down, Pastor Rhodes. Judge Caprio's voice cuts like steel. You called me vermin. You'll remain silent unless I address you directly. Sit down. Pastor Rhodes sits, jaw clenched. Chen picks up another document. Agent Torres, what did you discover about Pastor Rhodes's treatment of church employees? Multiple female employees filed complaints with the church board alleging sexual harassment. Pastor Rhodes allegedly made unwanted advances, sent inappropriate text messages, and created a hostile work environment. When women complained, they were fired or pressured to resign. The church board, controlled by Pastor Rhodes's appointees, dismissed all complaints. Do you have evidence? Yes. We recovered text messages from Pastor Rhodes's phone to 3 different female employees. The messages are sexually explicit and clearly unwanted. In one exchange, after an employee declined his advances, he texted, "Remember who signs your paycheck. Remember who speaks for God in this church. You owe me respect." Chen turns to the gallery. Your Honor, the state would like to call Sarah Mitchell, former administrative assistant at Resurrection Glory. A woman in her early 30s approaches the stand, professional but visibly nervous. She's sworn in. Miss Mitchell, how long did you work at Resurrection Glory? 3 years. I started as an administrative assistant in 2020. I was fired in 2023. Why were you fired? Sarah's voice shakes. I rejected Pastor Rhodes's advances. He started making comments about my appearance. Then he invited me to private meetings in his office after hours. Then he started texting me. The messages became sexual. I told him I was uncomfortable and wanted to keep our relationship professional. A week later, I was fired for performance issues that were never documented. Did you report this to anyone? I reported it to the church board. They said Pastor Rhodes was a man of God who would never behave inappropriately, and I must have misinterpreted his pastoral care. They suggested I was spiritually troubled and needed to pray for forgiveness for making false accusations. Chen hands her a document. Are these the text messages? Sarah's face flushes. Yes. Your Honor, the state would like to enter these messages into evidence. Judge Caprio nods. Read 3 examples. Keep it appropriate for the court. Chen reads from the document, voice flat and clinical. First message. You looked beautiful in that dress today. God creates beauty to be appreciated. Second message. Come to my office tonight. Private spiritual counseling, just you and me. Third message, sent after she declined. Remember, I'm the shepherd. You're the sheep. Sheep don't question shepherds. The courtroom is silent. Sarah is crying quietly. What happened after you were fired? I couldn't find work in Providence. Pastor Rhodes told other churches I was troubled and had made false accusations. My reputation was destroyed. I had to move to Boston to start over. I lost my apartment. I went into debt, all because I said no to him. Pastor Rhodes is staring at the table now, Bible closed in front of him. Miss Mitchell, why did you come forward to the IRS? Because I heard he did it to other women. Because I heard he was living in a mansion while members of the congregation were struggling to pay rent. Because someone had to stop him. If he can steal millions and harass women and call it God's work, then God needs better representatives. Chen nods. Thank you, Miss Mitchell. No further questions. Sarah steps down. As she passes Pastor Rhodes's table, he doesn't look up. Judge Caprio turns to the gallery. Are there other victims present? 2 more women stand. Both were former employees. Both have similar stories. Harassment, retaliation, character assassination. Both were told they were attacking a man of God when they complained. Both left broken and unemployed. Chen calls his next witness. The state calls Leonard Hayes, former church treasurer at Resurrection Glory. An older man, 70s, grey suit, takes the stand. He's sworn in. Mr. Hayes, how long were you treasurer? 8 years. I volunteered because I wanted to serve the church. I'm a retired accountant. I thought I could help ensure the money was used properly. What did you discover? Everything Agent Torres described. The shell companies, the fake charity, the excessive pastoral compensation. I brought it to Pastor Rhodes in 2022. I showed him the numbers. I told him this was fraud and we needed to correct it immediately. What was his response? Leonard's voice hardens. He told me to mind my own business. He said God had called him to prosperity and I was spiritually bankrupt for questioning it. He said if I told anyone, he'd make sure I was exposed as a Judas to the entire congregation. When I persisted, he had me removed from the board and publicly denounced me from the pulpit as someone who betrayed God's anointed. Did you contact authorities? Yes. I contacted the IRS. That's how this investigation started. And I paid for it. Members of the congregation, people I'd known for decades, stopped speaking to me. I received death threats. Someone spray-painted traitor on my house. All because I tried to stop a con man from stealing from people who trusted him. Chen closes his folder. Your Honor, the evidence is overwhelming. Pastor Rhodes created a criminal enterprise disguised as a church. He stole $38 million from his congregation. He evaded $11.4 million in federal taxes. He sexually harassed multiple women and destroyed their careers when they resisted. He intimidated and threatened anyone who questioned him, and he did it all while claiming divine authority. Judge Caprio has been taking notes throughout. Now he sets down his pen and looks at Pastor Rhodes. Stand up. Pastor Rhodes stands slowly. The confidence is gone. His face is pale. Pastor Rhodes, you called me vermin at the start of this hearing. You said I'm a parasite, an insect, an obstacle to God's work. I was speechless, I'll admit that freely. In 38 years, no one has dehumanized me like that. Judge Caprio picks up a document. But I've had 2 hours to think about your word choice while listening to evidence of your crimes. And I've realized something. You called me vermin because that's how you see everyone. Sarah Mitchell was vermin when she rejected you. Leonard Hayes was vermin when he questioned your finances. Your congregation members are vermin, sources of money to fund your mansion and your Bentley. In your mind, only you matter. Only you're human. Everyone else is something less. Pastor Rhodes's lips tremble. Your Honor, I'm not finished. You use the word vermin because you genuinely believe you're above accountability. You think your title makes you untouchable. You think calling yourself a pastor grants you immunity from laws that govern everyone else. You're wrong. Judge Caprio opens the verdict. Based on IRS evidence, financial records, testimony from victims and whistleblowers, and your own text messages, I find you guilty on all charges: tax evasion, wire fraud, money laundering, sexual harassment, witness intimidation, and contempt of court for calling me vermin. Pastor Rhodes grabs the table, legs buckling. Sentencing: tax evasion of $11.4 million, 15 years federal prison, Wire fraud across 12 years, 10 years, consecutive. Money laundering through fake charities, 8 years consecutive. Sexual harassment and retaliation, 5 years concurrent. Witness intimidation, 3 years consecutive. Contempt of court, 6 months consecutive. Total sentence, 36.5 years incarceration. The courtroom erupts. Pastor Rhodes collapses into his chair. Additionally, you will pay full restitution, $38 million to Resurrection Glory's creditors and victims, plus $11. $4 million in back taxes to the IRS with penalties and interest. All personal assets will be seized and liquidated. The mansion, the cars, the offshore accounts, the Rolex on your wrist, everything. Judge Caprio leans forward. You called me vermin. I'm going to tell you what vermin actually means. Vermin are parasites that consume resources while contributing nothing. They infest healthy systems and destroy them from within. They multiply unchecked when no one stops them. Pastor Rhodes, you're the vermin. You infested a church, consumed its resources, and destroyed lives. Today, the extermination begins. Pastor Rhodes is weeping now, head in his hands. I'm recommending to Congress that tax-exempt status for religious organizations require mandatory independent financial audits. I'm recommending that clergy sexual harassment be treated as a federal crime when it occurs in tax-exempt institutions. I'm recommending that any religious leader convicted of financial fraud forfeit all pension, benefits, and the right to lead religious organizations permanently. And I'm recommending enhanced sentences for anyone who uses religious authority to commit crimes. Judge Caprio picks up another document. These reforms will be called the Hayes-Mitchell Church Accountability Act, and your crimes, your text messages, your mansion purchased with congregation donations, and yes, your decision to call a judge vermin will be cited in every congressional hearing. You wanted to be remembered. Congratulations. Pastor Rhodes can barely breathe. Your Honor, please, I have a family. Sarah Mitchell had a career before you destroyed it. Leonard Hayes had a community before you turned it against him. Your congregation members had savings before you stole it. You're 68 years old. You'll be 104 when you're eligible for parole. Your family will visit you in prison if they choose to. Judge Caprio closes the file. Bailiff, remand the defendant to custody, transport him to federal holding, and get that Rolex off his wrist. It's evidence. 2 federal marshals approach. Pastor Rhodes looks up, desperate. I'm a man of God. You can't. You're a con man in expensive clothes. Judge Caprio's voice is final. Take him away. The marshals guide Pastor Rhodes toward the door. He passes Sarah Mitchell. She doesn't look away. He drops his gaze. The door closes. He's gone. If you believe religious leaders convicted of fraud should permanently lose the right to lead churches, subscribe to Order in the Court. Judge Caprio turns to Sarah Mitchell, Leonard Hayes, and the other victims in the gallery. What Pastor Rhodes did to you was evil. He used faith as a weapon and God's name as a shield. The law doesn't recognize divine immunity. Your courage in coming forward saved others from him. That matters. Sarah nods, unable to speak. Leonard wipes his eyes. 6 months later, Malcolm Rhodes sits in federal prison in Fort Dix, New Jersey. No tailored suits, no Rolex, no Bible. It was taken as evidence because he'd hollowed it out to hide a USB drive containing offshore account passwords. Brown prison uniform, cell 12C. His megachurch collapsed. Attendance dropped from 8,000 to 300 within weeks of his conviction. The building was sold to pay restitution. The mansion was seized and auctioned. The luxury cars sold. Total recovery. $31 million returned to creditors and victims. Sarah Mitchell received a settlement from the liquidated assets. She returned to Providence, started her own nonprofit supporting women who've experienced workplace harassment. She's rebuilding her life. Leonard Hayes was publicly apologized to by the congregation remnant. They acknowledged they were wrong to ostracize him. Some relationships were repaired, others never will be. Judge Caprio's reforms are pending in Congress with strong bipartisan support. The Hayes-Mitchell Church Accountability Act would require all tax-exempt religious organizations with annual revenues over $1 million to submit to independent audits. It would make clergy sexual harassment in tax-exempt institutions a federal crime. It would permanently bar convicted religious leaders from leading churches. 32 states have already passed or are considering similar legislation. Pastor Rhodes's word, vermin, became the sound bite that defined the case. News outlets played it constantly. Legal analysts called it the moment that sealed his fate. His contempt, his arrogance, his dehumanization of the judge became the symbol of why religious authority can't excuse crimes. Year 10. Malcolm Rhodes, now 78, has served 10 years of his 36-and-a-half-year sentence. He's eligible for compassionate release if he becomes terminally ill. Otherwise, he dies in prison. His wife divorced him. His children changed their last name. His former congregation members who visit him, 0. He works in the prison chapel cleaning floors. Volunteer chaplains know who he is. He sits in the back during services, alone. He wrote letters to Sarah Mitchell, Leonard Hayes, and Judge Caprio. None were answered. His letters to Judge Caprio began, "I shouldn't have called you vermin." They ended with requests for sentence reduction. All were denied. Judge Frank Caprio, now retired at 88, occasionally reviews old case files. He pulls the Rhodes folder sometimes. He reads the opening statement, "You are vermin, an insect, a pest that infests God's kingdom." He reads his response, "Pastor Rhodes, you're the vermin. You infested a church, consumed its resources, and destroyed lives." Malcolm Rhodes believed his title made him untouchable. He believed he could steal millions, harass women, and intimidate whistleblowers without consequence. He believed calling a judge vermin would assert his dominance. He was wrong about everything. "Vermin," he'd said, pointing with contempt. He'll spend the rest of his life proving who the real parasite was. Should all tax-exempt religious organizations be required to undergo annual independent financial audits? Tell us below.